for CEOs and millionaires. I've never seen my vision be more crystal clear. Look in the mirror, see the change in who I used to be. I kept going, knew success would come eventually. But ask about me back then, they said I wouldn't make it. Nowadays they doubt less and tend to ask for favors. Poetic music, that's realness, don't let them tell you different. And if you ever lost in doubt, then follow your intuition. These words of wisdom is for those who's trying to find their purpose. Don't be living just to die, cause only death is certain. I'm working hard so I can toast to my accomplishments. Cause see, I lost it all and I ain't been the same since. I'm more focused, more ambitious, more everything. Grew up with nothing, now I appreciate the finer things. I know it's real when at the shows they ask for autographs. And now they know the name, they ain't gotta ask. Yeah. They ain't gotta ask.
We are here.
It's finally happened.
You are the second person to be a repeat podcaster in the first 30.
Yeah.
So
the first one was online.
Yeah, the first one was online. This one is obviously in front of each other. Yeah, so appreciate you doing this. Obviously, I don't know. I think the people that listened to the last podcast got a lot of kind of an insider's look on Israel, kind of maybe how people maybe were feeling at the time. May was kind of a turning point here in many ways, with a new government, with...
I don't think it works the way you want it to work.
Sure it does.
No, because you're talking and it doesn't show you, it shows me.
I know, but there's still filming everywhere.
Ah, okay.
So I have a backup in case it's not going exactly how I want it to go.
Cool.
But,
okay,
go back and forth. See, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, so I mean, I think it was important for people to listen. I think you and Aaron specifically were good choices for that topic, because I think you're open to listen to criticism about the country from the outside, as opposed to just saying like everybody's against us. This is how, like, everybody knows deep down, like every place could improve a little bit in some way, to include this place, obviously. And just because somebody is being critical of Israel doesn't mean it's anti-Semitic. It just means that they're not particularly caring about sometimes the policies that are being legislated here in some way, and they think they could do better. And so with that, people are like, well, why are we bringing Yoni on? I think you get a different perspective from you specifically, because you've lived in the US for a little bit as well, just like Aaron lived in the UK. So I think you understand at least the North American mindset a little bit more. And obviously you worked in the Jewish community, but you also lived in like Denver proper, so you got a taste of like regular American life. So I guess maybe we'll start with just a little bit of background on like who you are as a person, talk about a little bit about how your family came to Israel, because I think it's a little bit unique.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of go into growing up in Israel, doing the army, and then becoming an emissary for the Jewish agency overseas.
Cool. So, yeah, so who am I as a person? That's a big mystery, I think, people in the academia all over the world are trying to figure it out,
For Yoni specifically, or just, in general? That's the question of who we are as people.
Yeah, who is this Yoni? I grew up here in Tel Aviv. I like to say that where I grew up, it's not really Tel Aviv. I kind of grew up in a bubble. I grew up in North Tel Aviv. It's, in a way, it's like growing up in, Upper West Side, or it's a very comfortable bubble. Though I have to say, my parents came to Tel Aviv from Ashkelon. So in a way, maybe it's like saying that, I grew up in New York, but my parents are from Detroit. Because they brought a lot of that work ethic with them. And, I grew up feeling that money is something that you need to really respect. And I wouldn't say like a mentality of scarcity, but I like this idea of, how do you call it? It's like social poverty. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it's like, because I went to a school, my elementary school was a school in which very different families find themselves sending their children to. On the one hand, you would have families that make 100,000 shekels a month, and then you've got families who are making, 15, 20,000 shekels a month. And all of these kids are going to the same school. So the gaps were great.
Yeah.
So I grew up with this mentality of like really feeling that gap. I saw my friends flying to ski vacations and wearing the best clothing they can get, and getting all the gadgets, and I didn't have it. So I grew up in a very wealthy area, but I didn't have a lot of these things, and I think it really affected me.
So you're the poster child of, they say, like in the States, you're the cheapest house in the block.
Interesting. Yeah. One of these, I have this vivid memory of my father sending me to the Boy Scouts leader, and he told me go and ask him for a discount for the annual membership. And I would ask my dad, like, why do we need a discount? And my dad would just say, because it's too expensive, because I don't think we should pay all of that membership.
Right.
So I think that's something that my parents kind of brought from Ashkelon. It's really...
Like nothing's ever set in stone. Like it's negotiable. Everything's negotiable.
Things are negotiable, but also like money is a big deal. We're not going to waste it. And, today I can tell you, looking back, we're not going to invest it smartly also. That's another thing I know. I never read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all that, but I can get it.
Your dad's both in one?
Yeah. But so I grew up in that neighborhood, but I would tell you that so one of the downsides growing up in a neighborhood like that was the things I just mentioned. One of the advantages were that I grew up in a neighborhood surrounded by very successful people. The leading business people of Israel, the leading real estate people of Israel, high level of generals. And I think it gives another effect to a teenager or to a child, that you see a lot of impressive examples of people that you can look up to. It's not like growing up it's just the opposite of growing up in a place like Sderot or Ofakim or the big neighborhoods of Be'er Sheva. So that's another thing I can think of. And you ask about my family? Yeah, so my dad's side, they came to Israel from Libya. So they left Libya they had a very comfortable life in Libya. My great-grandfather was one of the most wealthy people in the west of Libya, among the Jews. And you can actually read about him in this Jewish encyclopedia about Jews who lives in Muslim countries.
How did he accumulate such kind of wealth?
So he was really good in business. He got into the business of commodities. So he would trade with sugar and wheat and things like that.
Yeah.
All kind of grains. And they had like a huge house, like 10 bedrooms and a yard, and everyone knew them. In this town, small town called Zliten. And it what?
When did the family come to Israel?
To Israel. So when Zionism was at its peak and the country was established, so they were starting to talk about coming to Israel about 1949, 1950. And that's when my great-grandfather realized that slowly all of them will have to move because the surrounding Arab population will not be kind to them if they stay.
Mm.
So yeah, my grandfather was the first to move. It was 1950. And I think I told you maybe that story, but there is this story that everyone are saying in my family in which, the head of the family over there in Zliten, he calls up all the children, all the boys and the girls. He had 4 sons and 3 daughters. He gathers them, I think it was 1949. And he tells them, listen, all of you need to start thinking about leaving this place. This village is not going to be safe anymore. And you have my greeting, you have my I wish you good luck. And he looked at my grandfather and said, you're going to be the first. His name was Nissim. Nissim, you're going to be the first to travel. And then he takes out these really impressive chunks of gold. So he gives each one of his sons a huge chunk of gold. And to his 3 daughters, he didn't give nothing. Because that was the mentality. I mean, you don't need my gold. You'll travel to Israel. You'll find yourself a man.
Yeah.
He will take care of you.
How do you feel about that old school mentality?
I mean, that was the culture back then. I mean, maybe you don't know that, but my grandparents, I mean, Nissim, who was the first to leave Libya, and his wife, Gina, my grandmother, they were first-degree cousins.
Mm-hmm.
That was the culture, getting married inside the family. Things were kind of primitive, some of them didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to write.
Was that traditional, you think, in a sense? Because I know a lot of the banking families, the Jewish banking families, did the same thing because they wanted to make sure that no outsider was able to get into the family business in certain ways to protect manage the wealth. Because if you married a cousin, they're already part of this world. If you take an outsider that wasn't a part of this and all of a sudden becomes, the status just goes through the roof, like they could end up being a hole in a sinking ship, you know what I mean? So that was the reason for like the Rothschilds, the Montefiore, like these kind of people in Europe at the time. Do you think it was more cultural though, or was it more for business purposes? Do you think
I think it was more cultural.
Yeah.
But I would also agree that business-wise, it makes things more intelligent. The joke goes that my grandparents were 5-year-old and they were playing in the sandboxers, some kind of a sandbox. And
everything was sand in Libya.
Everything was sandy, yeah. But their parents looked out and they looked at them and said, "Oh, they play really nice one with each other. They should get married."
Sounds like Indians, like when they match their kids together already, like before they're even born sometimes. No, it's crazy. And then, obviously having Middle Eastern background, I think a lot of people that aren't from Israel, that don't know a lot about Israeli culture and society, they always think of people like me that just like showed up, and they're like, oh, we want to make a country now, which is totally not the case. And people like your family are case in point. They came from around the neighboring states because it became very unsafe to live there and to keep their way of life going in that sense. With that, we've actually traveled together. We went to Europe together 1 year to go see like my journey in a sense of showing off the Jewish community, and then also like you've actually been to Fulda, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, that's cool.
A lot of people never get to see because normally it's a train stop just to go to Berlin from Frankfurt. So like people seen it like on the train, but they've never actually stopped and
it's
done
like
it.
one of these cities that I have no reason to go there unless I know someone.
Exactly. Would you ever, if with the Abraham Accords and with everything else that's happened here recently and relations become more normal, would you ever do kind of historical journey with about your family and like maybe go to Libya at some point and like.
Yeah. You know, I'll be interested. I can't imagine it happening.
Right. No, I get it.
Because
especially
Libya,
now, it's.
I think Libya is so far away from being safe. But I think it's interesting. I'm much more proud of my Libyan side than my European side. I think it's much more exotic. It's much more interesting. You know, there was this time I even knew some of the language. I could tell you some phrases, some idioms. I don't remember them right now, but a lot of funny sayings in Libyan. You know, it's like a Jewish Libyan. Yeah, it's not the local Muslim dialect. It's like a special Jewish dialect in Libya. Yeah, I'm much more proud. I think it's even, you know, I can say it. It's a much more happy culture. I mean, the food is great. The food is better. The vibe, the family celebrations were always more nice and fun, you know.
That's bullshit because we had Shabbat dinner here and I saw you eating those pickles. Like,
so what's wrong with pickles?
I'm saying that's
European.
That's my culture. Yeah,
No,
I'm saying the food's amazing, but
yeah, but I mean, like Libyan food. I don't know. I mean, you had a chance, I guess, but you know, all of these like the inner parts of the beef and everything is stuffed with vegetables, a lot of fat, a lot of. It's definitely not healthy, but it's very good. I mean, my brother once asked my grandma, he told her like, listen, I want to spend half a day, you know, in the kitchen with you. I want to learn all the recipes, show me how you do it. And, you know, he got into the kitchen. He was in shock, you know, from the amount of fat. He's just taking fat and puts it in the pit, the pots and everything. There is this special Libyan food they eat on Passover. It's called bazin. So it's this really big pot. And it's kind of made with, basically it's kind of a mashed potato with beef. Okay. And what's special about it is the way you eat it. It's not very COVID friendly. So you put the pot on the table and people take their 2 fingers and they're like, and straight to their mouth and like, you know, it's like double dipping all the time.
Double dipping. I'm glad you know that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm still proud about that side of the family. And the other side, I've got, it's a kind of a complicated story because my grandparents, for my mom's side, so my grandfather, he was born in Poland and he came to Israel in 1936. Mm. So he graduated the Hebrew gymnasia, Hebrew...
like college prep, basically. For
a Jewish day school in Lodz. And he graduated with good grades enough so he could get the permit to come to Palestine. And he came here in 1936.
You said the P word.
Yeah, in Palestine, the historical aspect of it.
Yeah.
He came here and he started, he lived in Tel Aviv. He became a student at the Hebrew University in Mount Scopus. Mm-hmm. And I should have brought you some of his credentials. It's really cool. His old original credentials from the Hebrew University. And basically, he had to stop. He had to drop college he had to drop the school because September of 1939. You know, he loses the connection with his family in Poland. Mm-hmm. The money that was coming in to fund his tuition stop.
Yeah.
And he had to quit. And basically just found a job. And later in 1941, he joined the British military, like many other Jews back then. Yeah. And he served for 5 years, from 41 to 46. Mm-hmm. Traveled the world. He's been to Libya, which is kind of interesting. He came to Libya probably around the time my family was there. My other family was there.
Did they ever met?
I don't think he would have any reason to go to the villages on the west. He probably have been to the big cities.
Yeah, like Tripoli.
But I still have his bag from the British military and some of his equipment. He had a joke. He said that. Listen, I think I have many children around the world in every port city I've been to. I'm sure I have a son or a daughter. Oh, I used to say it next to my grandma. Yeah, so, and that's him. And my grandma, that's another interesting story. She was born here in Palestine. She was born in Jerusalem,
Okay.
1927. Her mom was born in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And her mom was born in Jerusalem. So it's like 3-4 generations born in Jerusalem. But she lived most of her life in Petah Tikva. And that's where she met my grandfather in a way, because she went to this Shabbat dinner. You know, it's, we talk a lot about Shabbat dinners and single people. So she went to this Shabbat dinner in Petah Tikva. And she gets to this Shabbat dinner, you know, it's like with relatives, and people know that she's single. And she tells her, listen, like, you have like a distant second degree, third degree cousin. His name is David. And he serves in the British military, and I think you could be a good match. And you guys should meet, you know, next time he gets leave from the service. And that's how it started, you know. It was a match made in a Shabbat dinner, and they got together and they exchanged letters. We still have the letters, and that's it. History.
Crazy. So, I mean, you are the perfect example of what like people call the Jewish cocktail. Just a little bit of everything to make the full-bred Israeli. Do you think that's initially what the founding members of the movement wanted, like Ben-Gurion and all these people? Do you think, or do you feel like it just morphed into that and they had to deal with it the way it was?
I think it morphed into that. I think many of the Zionist leaders back then, even before Ben-Gurion, you know, if we're talking about the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just reading about it, I can tell you some interesting stuff. They had a vision, to be honest, of a nation full of like high quality people. I think they imagined them to be very white, European, with, you know, educated, with professions.
And labor guys, you know, like they
Yeah, the labor is important. I mean, definitely. I mean, someone needs to do farming and everything. But I'm now reading about this. I'm reading about the pogroms in Ukraine between 1918 to 1920, what some people refer to as the small Holocaust or the little Holocaust.
Okay.
About 40,000 Jews were killed and 60,000 were injured. And when you see the protocols of the discussion within the Zionist leadership in Palestine back then about what should we do with the refugees, so many of them are saying, you know, these are not good refugees for us. They're not good for us. You know, they should go to the U.S. or other countries. We need different people.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because a lot of I read Tom Segev's book on Ben-Gurion and then Golda's biography as well. And they talk about that, and it was a constant struggle between necessity. You need people to start a country. You can't really be choosy. And a lot of times, even before then, a lot of the people that were coming initially were orphans from World War I. So they lost their families in some way, had nothing else to really live for in Europe, and this whole idea of this country for Jews was really taking hold in Eastern Europe, not in Western Europe.
Yeah.
Because of already being assimilated so much, like whatever was happening in Western Europe, at least legally, but then also like what was actually happened when the legislation got passed, always took a little bit longer to do in Eastern Europe. And so with that, you know, that time gap in between of normalization of all people are created equal, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It just didn't resonate, and Poland finally became a country again, like in like 1920s. So I can't remember the exact dates, right? But during that time, that you had to speak Polish, there was like the thriving communities, and the borders changed all the time. So one day you were Polish, one day you were Russian, one day you were, you know, part of the German Empire in some way, and those, it really, I think, confused people and only made them more involved in the Jewish youth movements that were going on at the time. He was like, well, this never changes for me, so let's figure that out. So.
Yeah. But by the way, David Ben Gurion, many historians are saying that he was very unique with the aspects of his approach to immigration when he said, okay, we need them all. It's about time we accept all of them. We're not going to ask, we're not going to be very specific about, what's your profession, you have a right to be here. I mean, of course there is criticism about where we will send you when you come here, but yeah, I mean, look at my family. I mean, they ended up in Ashkelon, so like, why Ashkelon? Again, it's like a city that needs to be, it's a town basically, and a town needs to be developed. By the way, used to be, of course, Palestinian town, Palestinian city, not a city, I would say a Palestinian town before 1948.
With that, you're mentioning that, did your grandparents ever talk about coming from an Arab country and then coming here? Did they feel more connection with Jewish people or more with the Arab population?
So they would feel, I think definitely they would, if they were alive today, they would tell you that they would feel much more connected to the Jewish people. And I think it has to do with an entire system that was working in the beginning of the 50s, through the 50s and the 60s, to tell all of these Jews who came from Muslim countries, don't speak Arabic in public. We are here in Israel, you need to speak Hebrew. My grandfather even, he knew Yiddish, so he spoke Yiddish with some people. But like, put your past in your past, We don't want to hear about your Arab culture. I think that was really working.
Do you think that was a good thing, or in hindsight, looking back at it, do you think it really hurt the country in some ways with the relationships that they had?
I mean, maybe it was needed back then, to build a nation, to build a nation, to build a narrative, to unite the Jews around this narrative.
To have a common language, to have a common culture.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, my grandparents, they would sit at home watching Egyptian television, watching Libyan television. They would speak Arabic between them. Their children, so my father and his brothers, they don't speak Arabic. They would understand a little bit. But, that's interesting when it comes to language. Like, what is the language you choose to teach your children? So many of these immigrants who came from Muslim countries, they decided they're not going to teach their children their native tongue language. That's interesting. I never thought about it.
Well, then you have, the Middle Eastern, the Mizrahi, the Eastern Jews. But then you have Russians who are very, very much into their old culture as much as they are.
Many of them are teaching Russian to their children,
Absolutely. I mean, what makes you think that this group, because I guess maybe they weren't allowed to be Jewish in their country, in the Soviet Union, in the same way that Libya or Iraq or other places where you could, until a certain time, be openly Jewish and there was no real detriment to your life?
I think they came in with much more pride, much more pride about being Russian Jews. Many of them obviously they came here much more educated. And maybe they're saying themselves, okay, I came to Israel, I don't know Hebrew, I don't know the local language, which makes me, I face its challenges now when I'm looking to get a job in my field. I used to be a doctor, I can't be a doctor. The only thing I can do now is to be a security guard or to clean, apartments. So the least I can do is to teach my son my language, the Russian language I'm proud of, the Russian history, and so the food and everything.
Yeah. With that, as you're growing up, you might want to talk a little bit about, you were talking about that, you're mentioning the placement of people when they get here. Obviously, the conception of we need to take everybody that wants to come here and wants to be here as part of building a country. the second part is, how do you design a country that's essentially borderless at the time? Like, where is the areas that you want? Where is the areas that you need to fill in that sense? Because if you look back at a lot of the legal like wording and stuff, basically, if you are managing the land, you are living on that particular land in some facet, it can become yours.
Yeah.
And so with that, when you're thinking about like these guys, the yeshuv, the community that is here at the time pre-modern state of Israel, how would you think about creating a country? Would it be on natural borders? Would it be on, resources, like obviously the Sea of Galilee would be important. There's certain things that you absolutely need for your country to survive, even though it doesn't exist yet. And when you think about it like that, it's crazy to think that like these people just kind of showed up in some ways and just kept adding to the plan, Like if you were sitting in some of those meetings of the labor movement, the Histadrut, like what would you...
WCO,
Yeah. What would you find interesting about those meetings, and what would you suggest that to them thinking about it the way you've seen it now?
Yeah.
What would you tell the committee based on what your thoughts are?
I mean, I'm very rational. I think some of these calls, or many of these decisions were the right decisions to make, because my reserved service, I'm doing it on the border with Lebanon. So I'm next to Kiryat Shmona and Metula sometimes, and Tel Chai, all of these places in the upper Galilee of Israel. Someone had to be there. I mean, we needed people there in order to have boots on the ground, have someone claiming the land. Tel Chai, I mean, we had Jews in Tel Chai in the upper Galilee, I think it was 1903 or something like that. Even maybe a couple of years before that, at the end of the 19th century. And also in the south, like a place like Dimona, and the brutal way in it. You could say it's kind of brutal, the way they sent some of these Jewish immigrants there, coming from India, coming from Morocco. There's a great Israeli movie, maybe you saw it 15, 20 years ago. It's called At the End of the World, Turn Left. It's about the Jews that were sent to Dimona.
Okay.
It was a cool thing to do, but I think history proved that it was right. That we needed, again, if you support the idea of a Jewish state in this area, then someone needs to claim the land and control it. It's like, why do we have people in Elat? Yeah, it's like so far away, down there. I think it was the right thing to do back then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people forget you can't judge decisions that were made by today's metrics of standards of ethics and morality and other things, right? Because we've changed as a society, and what was okay back then it probably is not okay today. And I acknowledge that, and I give room for more mistakes, for history, for things like that were made, right? When you're talking about putting down people in Dimona, Yocham is a perfect example. Yeah. Like the mayor's family is from there, probably from the beginning, And thinking that, and not only that, but forecasting the need for the nation was small at that time. But if it did work, we're going to need more area to become a bigger nation and have enough room to do and expand what they thought was right or what's going to be. When you look at Beersheba today from what it was, let's say, like 50 years ago, it's amazing, right?
Beersheba, it's amazing, but if you go down that path that you are kind of creating, then some of the more important questions about these places would be, why there are just little people, like few people living there. I mean, Beersheba, that's a good example, but Yerucham and Dimona, and if you go up north, the Golan Heights, not enough Israelis want to move there. The infrastructure is not good.
So like talking with all those people, like spotlighting the Negev here, I'm going to have to disagree with the demand. The demand is there. It's the fighting with Jerusalem and fighting with the Southern Command on actually giving up Dunam to actually create
more housing. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that's the biggest problem.
Okay.
They don't want to give up any little piece of land, even if it's close to something that's already established. Let's say like Nitzana. And you're just like, do you really need all of this area, like all of it for the military? I can understand having a good training area, right? But there's a difference in the sense of having a great training area and like impeding progress just because you just don't want the things to change in a certain way, right? Like say like if they could build 20,000 homes and then actually create the small Bedouin areas that they wanted to really develop, right? All at the same time. That would create the infrastructure naturally, what we're talking about and what's lacking. So at least if people need to drive to Beersheba to work or something like that, that they have something. So perfect example is that Ramat Negev, they just built a high school. So now kids don't have to drive an hour plus from Mitzpeh to anywhere else to go to Beersheba to go to school. They're literally right there in the area to where it helps so many people. Like, they have the bus routes and everything else, and they still have their feel of everything. You're not an outsider coming into Beersheba just to go to school and then go back. So I think it creates an identity even more to be able to say, I'm from Ramat Negev. I was helping my friend Jared do interviews for the new Shinshin that are applying to the Jewish Agency and working at the JCC.
Interesting.
And so when I hear them and they're talking about, I'm graduating from Ramat Negev High School, there's like, I feel it, like there's a little bit of a pride there.
Yeah, definitely.
In a sense of like, this is our school. I'm the first one the first person to graduate from this high school, in a sense of the year. So I think it's cool. It's creating something different and unique in that way. Same with Yocham, to see the science center and it becoming like the drone capital of Israel, but then they want to even go bigger for the region, the world, whatever, where R&D is going to be done on drone technology there, where they have kids that are studying drone hardware and software integration with actually designing it and creating things straight from scratch and doing the CNC lathing and actually building it out. Like, I want this thing to shoot ping pong balls and when I push a button, and so they designed the tube to make it do that, and so it's flying around and then they hit a button and then the ping pong balls shoot out.
Nice.
So like stuff like this, they just had a drone fair. So I think the history, you need to appreciate the history to understand where they're going in the future, and I think the future is very bright, to be honest, and I think it's a push on people actually staying there. And other people, some of the people that are working, for example, at the Science Center in Yocham, or people that are coming down for more of a community feel, are getting what they want that they lack here in the center, right? Like, we live here, it's kind of feeling like New York or some other place. Like, if you don't find your community, you could be very lonely here very
Tel Aviv,
quickly.
you mean? Yeah.
But there, like, you can't live on a kibbutz and not know your neighbors, like, it's just not possible. So I think people go there for that reason. And the guy I talked to, Leon, he was talking about it as well, where he had to get away from talking the business mindset of like growing at all costs, like the same way you do in
the startup,
in Tel Aviv, in the startup world, right? He then understood what it meant to be a solopreneur, where you just like, you want to own a Zimmer, you maybe have a regular job, But that little extra income is enough for you to live your life, and life is slow. The volume's turned down.
Nice.
And it was very hard for him to understand that at the beginning. He's like, why don't you want to grow and have tents in one place? And he's just like, this is not how people operate down there. And so once he understood the mindset, he was able to really tap into the area. And he said there's like over 800 businesses within 8,500 people. So things like that, like it's the perception of the central part of the country to the south, to the north, that is going to change here very shortly. Because let's face it, everybody in the middle, if you didn't come here within the last 30 years, or like your family's not from Tel Aviv proper, you're going to get priced out and pushed out to the sides where actually you grew up.
Yeah, I mean, I can thank my family for doing this. One of the most dramatic decisions that kind of affected my life was their decision to move to Tel Aviv when they were 25, 24.
Yeah.
To leave Ashkelon behind. When you look on their siblings who stayed in Ashkelon, different lifestyle, different possibilities, different options, different opportunities. It's an issue of opportunities. I heard this interview with this teenager from, I think she's like Kiryat Shmona. And she's like a very high level, how do you say, someone who plays the violin.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And she says, like, listen, all of the best teachers are in Tel Aviv. All of the best music schools are in Tel Aviv. But I'm 16, I'm 17, what am I supposed to do? My parents cannot drive me all the time. Like, all of these opportunities are kind of blocked for me as someone that sees herself, joining the national classical musical band and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling fortunate that I grew up in Tel Aviv, definitely.
And how do you're talking about the periphery now and the opportunities that they have. Obviously, there's going to be disadvantages of that. How do you feel about diaspora helping build that infrastructure faster through like Jewish National Fund? Like they have a culinary institute in Kiryat Shmona now. Like no kidding. Like top chefs are going to go there and learn how to be chefs. And wherever they end up, obviously, it's probably going to be in the center somewhere. But to get that exposure in those areas.
I mean, we are, all of us, people of Israel, are lucky. Well, I would say the Jewish people of Israel. maybe also the non-Jews, but all of us are lucky and fortunate to have the support of donors, Jewish donors, and Jewish donations, and money, Jewish donations coming to Israel. Just yesterday, someone told me that the estimation of Jewish foreign money coming to Israel every year for philanthropic reasons, it's 8 billion shekels a year. So how much would that, in dollars, that would be what?
It's about almost 3 billion. 2.8, something like that. Almost $3 billion
every year. And when you think about the U.S. foreign aid to Israel every year, which is about 3 point something, so it's kind of the same, it's crazy, Well,
there's two things. One, you're forgetting about Christian Zionists who actually donate more money than Jews now. Mm-hmm. There's one thing. Yeah. The second thing is that the aid package for Israel is more like a rebate program to buy weapons.
Yeah.
So it's not really going to the people in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it helps a lot of American business people.
Well, yeah, exactly. It helps more people selling weaponry, like the defense contractor world, than it does the actual the people of Israel in some way. Maybe indirectly, but...
Yeah, so I saw this interview with the mayor of Be'er Sheva, Robik Danilevich. I forgot his... Yeah. But he said, listen, we had this vision for a neighborhood around a park. So the first thing we did, we said, okay, we need to build this park and a lake. And he said, I came to the government and said, listen, I got the JNF in the US people willing to give the money, like a third of it.
Yeah.
or a bit more than that even. And I'm looking at you, the Israeli government, I have this money ready. Come on, like, where is your money? Where is your funding? And when he finally got the funding and he created this park and the lake, that's when he could approach real estate entrepreneurs and tell them, listen, the park is ready. You just need to build around the park. And so it happened. Now you see this amazing neighborhood and people are, walking in the park and it's...
I know exactly what you're talking about because I've been there like 4 years, or it's a long time ago, 7 years ago. And sometimes I forget like how many times I've been here and like what year it was or whatever. But I came here on like a volunteer trip with the Jewish National Fund. And they're like, yeah, we're building this park here, and then we're gonna fill the lake up with water, and then you start to see slowly like new buildings like coming up, kind of in the same way you see in Tel Aviv. Like really nice apartments. Maybe almost close to 100 square meters. Just like overlooking the park and the lake. Yeah. And you're just like, all right, yeah, whatever. And then now you drive through there. I was dropping somebody off the other week, and you see it, and it's done. And like people from Ramat Negev take their kids and drive into the city
to the park
to come and play.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So you get to see the synergy of the projects in creating a better lifestyle, a better way of life for everyone. Yeah, I think. Cool. A lot of people know like Russell Robinson is a very influential person. He's usually in the Jerusalem Post. He's the CEO of JNF. And he's also a mentor. He wrote my letter of recommendation to go to university, and nice. I take a lot of hints from him on like how he interacts with people, but then also how he's not going to dwell, like he knows that like there's issues all over, right? But he's just like, listen, I'm here. I'm very proud of what I do. And if I can create an avenue of pride and Jewish identity for the people in North America to have some kind of connection in some way to Israel, I've done my job. And I really respect that from him, on how he goes about it, on how he invests in the youth and brings people into the JNF future and other people that are slowly coming onto committees. Like I'm part of the task force for Ramat Negev. So they've done a couple projects where you'll start to see like different things, like the rescue center that they have for like hikers and stuff like that. Because there's so many people that are hiking in that area and they don't know the area that well, or they run out of water or they get hurt. And now they actually have like a professional, like volunteer crew with all the gear that they need to actually go and rescue somebody that maybe like broke their leg in an area in a valley or something, where they have to bring them out, or at least get a helicopter close by or something like that. Mitzpeh Ramon has a convention center coming soon. Things where people from the center will be able to go down there, get a taste of the life, and maybe be drawn to it in some way. You never know, right? But to go down to those areas to see the changes. The last time I was here was 4 years, and to see like a new high school, the science center in Yocham, the other projects that they're doing, I have a tremendous amount of respect and pride for the people that not only are putting the effort into helping develop the area because they have a spiritual and maybe even political connection to the country. Yeah. But I think it shows the value of being together and having those partnerships to create something in a better way. I mean, they're even doing stuff with a place called Wadi Atir, where they're building slowly like a Bedouin town, like a more concrete place, not these shacks and things like that.
We already have, I think, 7 Bedouin towns. Yeah.
So there's 13.
13.
Yeah, in the area, and they're growing fast. And it's something that I take great pride in, knowing the people that are managing, like, for example, Ramat Negev Regional Council, that are making the effort to go around and talk with these people and make them a part of the community, because they're growing that much faster.
You know Raz Arbel?
Yeah, I know Raz.
Because I know he was leading an initiative to teach these people how to create local tourism initiatives.
Yeah, it's still like on the plate. There's another guy that's helping out with that stuff in some way, but In the same time, the relationships that they've built started with the Shmulik Rifman.
Yeah.
So the previous mayor, and he just said, he's like, these are Israelis, not only, you know, by citizenship, but like they're my neighbors, you know, like I can't drive by these people every morning and just be like, yeah, whatever. So he started that movement. Eran, the new mayor, has been in the position for a while now. He's continuing that movement of integrating them. And obviously people are very cautious, you know, it's not like they don't want to help, but at what cost? Is it detrimental to what they've already built and all that stuff? So it's a very fine line in that way. But when the stuff happened, the riots happened in May, after everything that was going on, those 13 villages, they didn't riot. And the reason why is because they have the continuous communication between them. They understand them, and they want to learn more from them. They want to help them integrate into society better. It's just that Jerusalem doesn't look at the area, from what I understand, in the best way possible. They come down there to do the schmoozing for the votes and this and that, and then you never see them until the government falls apart again, you know? So hopefully in the future, it becomes more important as the area in the middle just becomes so saturated with people and the prices and other things. If they can get ahead of the game, build out the infrastructure, have a master plan of some kind of reel in some of those generals that are in charge down there to say, hey, we need to work together for the better of the country in the long run. Do you really need every single dunam out here? Probably not.
Yeah,
between
also,
that and the national parks, of course.
Also, I think, you know, the future of the IDF is not the infantry soldier.
No.
So you don't need that amount, you know, that's so many training grounds.
That's interesting you say that. So like with the warfare and everything else that's happened here, what do you see as far as is Israel's future in the world, in technology, R&D, in that space, but then also the role of the IDF and the citizen soldier of Israel in the future?
It's a big question. I think the IDF is still a place where, as a young individual, you can be exposed to a lot of opportunities. I mean, you can. I think IDF is a lot about self-growth if you have the right mindset. I mean, I was one of these soldiers that, like, no matter what you throw at me, I would keep on smiling. Like, I would always look for the bright side of every military situation. I mean, even when I spent like 5-6 days in the brig, in the military prison.
What did you do?
I mean, I well, you know, I fell asleep in the Egyptian border, you know, while watching the border.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, we were a group of 4 or 5 people. All of us fell asleep, and the company commander kind of, you know, caught us in the act. So, you know, even when I was in the military brig, I mean, you still look around and you see, like, what are the opportunities here? And I can tell you, you know, sitting in that military prison, I was looking to my left, I was looking to my right. I was seeing a lot of interesting people that I never met before. Like, it was an opportunity for me to speak with some really interesting Israeli individuals who came from some really challenging parts of the Israeli society. And I remember having this conversation with this guy called Avram. He was an Ethiopian Jew. His family was facing a lot of hardships. And he was doing some time in the prison there because he was leaving his base all the time without permission to go and work and to help the family. Mm-hmm. And, you know, obviously he did it without a permission, so he ended up spending some time in just a couple of weeks in the brig. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking to him, and he's telling me about his life, and then I have this moment of realization. I'm saying, listen, like, wow, I'm embarrassed to say it, I'm 20, 21 years old. No, I was maybe 20, 19. That's my first time having a conversation with an Ethiopian Jew.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up in a very white area.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an example. But I think the army or the military is full of opportunities. If you seek it, if you look it up, I mean, you don't have to even end up in a technological unit.
Right.
You can even get to like a very old-fashioned unit, but aspire to be a commander, aspire to be an officer, shoot for something that is greater than yourself. Maybe find yourself a position in which you're doing teaching and guiding. Ask for your commanders to send you to some professional training. Try and see like what are the things you can get out of this service that makes your life much more meaningful when you get out. It's not a long time. I mean, they kind of changed it lately, like 2.8 years for men and 2.2 for women. Yeah.
Do you think that you always had this initiative about the way you look at life, or that it slowly became that way when you were around other people?
No, I mean, it's something I developed when I was a teenager, or even when I was, 11, 12. I was very good in improv. I was doing a lot of improv at school and the local JCC.
Yeah.
I mean, theater and acting was a big part of my life. And I think also like using a clever sense of humor, which kind of needs you, it makes you think fast. And in the Boy Scouts, by the way, the Israeli Scouts was like a dramatical part of my life. I was heavily affected there. People called me, I had a nickname. Well, I had a couple of nicknames. One of them, you will not be surprised, was Grandpa Yoni. When I was 16, 17, oh, Grandpa Yoni, come along, come over here, So that was one nickname. Another nickname was, they called me Magdil, Magdil. And what does it mean? So there's a saying, Le'agdil Rosh. In Hebrew, it means make your head bigger. It's a slang that basically talks about someone that is thinking outside of the box.
Okay.
And he's like looking at a situation and he will do it differently than other people because he's like thinking big. So that was another nickname. And yeah, I was always like that, I think.
No, what would your parents say to that? Would they think that they had some is it nurture, is it nature kind of situation?
I don't know. I think maybe it was some of this, some of it it's their fault. Yeah, they had me playing with Lego and sent me to all kind of classes. I remember they sent me to like I
mean, both of them were in education at some point, right?
So my mom, she's a college graduate. My father is not.
Okay.
But books, it was very centered in our home, reading books, and I mean, yeah, conversations were always like very intelligent. And they sent me to one summer. They sent me to electronics summer camp. When you get together, like I was 12. You get together with other nerds. And
there must be a lot of people around you.
Yeah, I mean, it was like 25 people there. And you get together all morning and you build these kits, electronic kits. And around 12:30 you will go to the pool. But so a lot of stuff like that.
Yep.
I mean, the military was a great journey for me. I spent 6 years and 4 months there on uniform, and another 1 year extra as a civilian consultant. It was a great journey for me. I remember that day when I was in service 2 years and 8 months. So it was 2 years and 8 months into my service. It was Sunday morning. I'm an officer already. I was I was in charge of training in my battalion in the Gaza border. So you can say a staff officer in the HQ of the battalion. And it's Sunday morning. I'm putting my uniform on. I'm getting my bag ready, and all of a sudden I have this realization. You okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I'm getting my uniform on, and all of a sudden I have this realization that I'm really okay about coming back to base. Like I'm happy about coming back to base. So because I'm saying it because there is this very well-known phenomenon in Israel. It's called the Sunday sadness.
Okay.
It's when soldiers on Sunday morning are kind of sad going back to their bases.
Okay.
Because they partied all weekend. It's a different system here. Yeah, the soldiers in Israel get a leave every other week, or it depends. Yeah, every 5 days, every 6 days, every 12 days. But this Sunday sadness, it's something you hear from many, many Israeli soldiers, definitely. We're talking about mostly about, even non-combat office soldiers. But after 2 years and 8 months, all of a sudden I realize I don't have a Sunday sadness anymore. Like, I am fully connected, aligned with my service, in which I'm happy to go back to base. And that was also like kind of led into my decision to stay even longer than
normal.
The normal.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate. I mean, most people that know me know I was in the U.S. Army for like 12 years. Which when you talk to Israelis and you tell them 12 years of active service, they look at you like you're a crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
And then, there was just something about it where it's something that I grew up around, and so it was kind of like a lot of the same stories of Israel, like if your dad did something, it's familiar. You see that person in uniform, you see their friends, you see how they act, you see the people around you being a certain way, it becomes so familiar that you feel like you're a part of it even though you're not. And even more so here because I think most 40% of the population are actually actively involved in the service in that way. With that, when you left the service from the active side, what lessons did you ultimately take away from the time that you were in that you would say are the best parts of you today?
Wow. I remember this really amazing class that we were taught at officer school by a lieutenant colonel that spent some time in the first Lebanon war. And he said something about... in Hebrew, it's called tiaduf veproportia. So proportions and prioritization.
Okay.
And it kind of, and I take it to my life today, which means that I always think of every day that in my job, in my business, as I go along in my life, I'm thinking, what should happen before what? What are my priorities? And do I have the right perspective? Do I have the right perspective of things? Or am I carried away in this emotion that might be artificial?
Okay.
So, it really helps me when I go along my day. What else? When I was a young staff officer at the battalion level, my supervisor was a major. He was the second in command in the battalion, and I used to come to him with all kind of dilemmas and questions and stuff like that. And eventually he said, Yoni, you're an IDF officer. You need to make your mind. Why do you come to me with all of these dilemmas and questions? And you're an officer. You got the responsibility. You need to make these decisions, and you will face the consequences later. Yeah, it's your responsibility. But I would be a bad commander if I were to tell you everything I think about everything you do all the time.
Yeah.
So make decisions, stand behind your decisions, be proud of them. Yeah, it was a great school of life, really.
It's funny you mentioned this agency, for a better term, in the sense of owning your ideas, you know? I saw it at the end of my service where, like, being in a special unit was like, wow, right? In certain ways. But at the same time, the longer I stayed, the more I saw people, it became a place where it almost became like a politician, where you can't make a mistake. You can't say the right or wrong. You can't say the wrong thing. You can't step on your dick, as they say in English in the military, you know, step on your crank. I'm teaching you some slang too. And I thought that was sad because it in one way it made me grow up faster. But then when I saw the same people having to go through that same experience behind me, they were sad. And that's something that I wish will eventually get corrected, and I think it will. But when you just have these people and going through war and going through these conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan for almost 20 years, give or take, right? People, I think, saw if you make a mistake, it could be deadly. Yeah. And they were afraid to make those mistakes. And then those mistakes, that mindset came back to the base. And so in training and other things, right? Yeah. You started to take less risk even in training because you were afraid that you might lose your spot if you're an officer, because you only get 2 years on a team as a Green Beret, basically. And then you become a staff officer and you like go into the world of offices and management and everything else, right? So like your time on the ground is very short. So
as a team leader, as an officer, you would only have 2 years to lead the team?
Yeah, so it's two years to get there in your school where you learn the language and all that balagan. And then from there, then you get to your team and you basically have 2 years. Before the team sergeant, which is the head NCO, the head non-commissioned officer guy, from what I understood, he used to have 5 years, you know? So that was a really good thing because I feel like, and you probably know the same thing, like 2 years, like so many things happen in your job that like...
It's not enough. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're very reactionary, I think, those first 2 years. But then you really become into your own after those 2 years. And to like take it away from somebody right when they feel like they know what the fuck they're doing.
Interesting.
I think it's a detriment to the force. And I think people are seeing that big time now.
You make me think of this viral video by Simon Sinek that was viral maybe 2 years ago. How he talks about the millennials who come to a new job, and you know it's been 5 months, it's been 6 months, it's been 8 months, and they are not happy. They want to switch a job. They want to move to a new company. It's like, and he says like, wait a minute, you have to wait. 8 months is not enough. Like you have to go and be a part of the system. 1.5 years, 2 years to fully feel, you know, if it's the right place for you and experience the different processes and procedures and everything. It made me think of that as well.
I got another one. So my team sergeant, the first one, I was very, very, very new. And he knew that, and he knew that I wasn't coming from an infantry background. So in some ways it hurt me, but maybe not so much because I had a different outlook on many things. But he told me, he basically just said, I don't want to hear your voice for 6 months. That was like my in brief, like coming in, because he's just like, you don't know shit. Like you know absolutely nothing.
You need to absorb.
You need to absorb everything, like how to be a professional. And at first, you know, like I'm 24 years old, like I'm like, fuck you. I know what I'm doing. I've been in the army for 5 years, 6 years now. I can figure it out, blah, blah, blah. And he was, I hate to say it, but he was right. He was so fucking right. And so
Interesting.
But what it really honed me in on was being observational. Like that's my best quality, like leaving the military now, is being able to stay quiet, assess what's going on around me, and then being able to provide hopefully valuable input going into a situation. I think that's been the biggest quality to take away from it, to be able to essentially be a team member first, and then when you're in charge, be in charge.
That's cool, because I was in this situation of being a young lieutenant or a young captain sitting in a room full of generals and colonels, and I would be, I had to be very quiet, observe, listen, to find that one small opportunity in which I could, raise my voice and say something with value.
It's very different in the officer world too. Like everything in the U.S. is led by generally the senior non-commissioned officers. So when you look at it, like you basically get your orders, and that guy like handles everything. Like you would tell me what to do, and I would run 40 dudes. That's just how it goes, and I've also trained those guys all the way down. So like the squad leaders, the team leaders, those are my dudes.
Like that's his career, He would stay there for most of his adult life, or up until 42 or something like that.
Exactly. The way your military is structured, you can't do that. You have to push people up as fast as possible, because you need it.
I think in our special forces we have these NCOs, but they are not, they're not leading the people. They are professionally hold the knowledge and the history of the unit, and they know how things were done, and they are valuable, but you won't find these people in the infantry units, in the infantry battalions, so on.
Do you think it's beneficial to put this kind of pressure that you guys put on not only soldiers, but then the young officers like you were in these situations at such a early age? I mean, like you're 20 years old and you could be making decisions that could really affect people's lives in a big way. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's just realistic based on the situation?
Yeah, I mean that's a realistic thing. It's a necessity. The big system. The system needs young people. The system is hungry for young people to do their jobs. It's a challenge. We both saw this video of these young border police soldiers. So maybe not all of the listeners know that some of the soldiers in the IDF, they don't serve in the IDF. They serve in the border patrol, which is not part of the IDF, it's part of the police. So you've got these enlisted soldiers on the border patrol, and some of them are serving in East Jerusalem. And we saw that video of a stabbing incident in which a Palestinian guy is walking in the streets of Jerusalem. It's kind of in the steam between East and West. And he is stabbing this ultra-Orthodox guy. And the reaction of these two soldiers, a man and a female, is very quick. It's very quick, but not very intelligent, not very precise. I mean, they just shoot. They don't think if they should shoot to his leg or to his hand, to the center of body, to his head. They just shoot because they are stressed, they are shocked,
trained in that way.
And that's the way they react. So I would expect them, and he falls on the ground, and they continue shooting. I mean, they shot maybe 6-7 bullets, which obviously it's too much, to my opinion. Like I would expect them to be able to shoot him in the leg, and just make him
incapacitated.
Yeah, But they didn't get this training, and they are young. They are 20 years old, 19 years old. They are very stressed. So the result is that you see this really bad video clip that is now all over the social media of two young soldiers, you could say like almost like executing, if I am phrasing it in the language of my enemy, executing this man in the streets. And if you edit that video in the right way,
exactly,
then you don't see the stabbing, you just see them killing, shooting at him. So that's one of the challenges we have with young enlisted soldiers here.
If so you showed me that video as well. It's in the Sheikh Jarrah area of East Jerusalem, and that's a lot of tension there. If you want some videos on the situation, I'll look for some and put them in the link on YouTube and everything else, so you can go to those and educate yourself a little bit better. But to make a long story short, there's an area in East Jerusalem that has about 20 or 30 Arab families that essentially were squatters. They were kicked out of their area wherever they lived in Jerusalem at the time, and this was like the periphery of the city. They essentially just made camps there and eventually built out some hard structures and stuff, and they all live in the same area. They're not really on a title of any kind. There's no real anything, right? They've just basically homesteaded is what it's called in English. With that, it's created a lot of problems within the area because of them not actually owning the area, the land, or the what they built there. And so from a legal sense, it's a problem, but from a the legal aspect of it, but from a political aspect, it's even more charged because you have a lot of fringe Orthodox groups that are slowly buying up land in areas in East Jerusalem legally, but then also taking a little bit extra on top of that. And so they're just pushing the issue that much more from a demonstration sense, from a legal sense, and from many other ways. And so it's creating this powder keg of international spotlight on that particular situation, where if you would go anywhere else in the world in the same facet and somebody is just living on land that's not theirs, but they've been living there for 50 years, it would be no different on a legal perspective in that same country. But the fact of the matter that it's between Jews and Arabs here only makes it that much more politicized. I'll leave it a little bit more on the video to send you a link to like Vice News, who covered it pretty well, in my opinion, and some other things. So that gives you a little bit more context to this. So back to the stabbing. The stabbing is, as Yoni mentioned, and I'll send a video out as well, some of the edited versions and then the real version of the long form version of what they have. And both sides have utilized this opportunity for some exposure to their particular cause. With that being said, I'm in total agreement with Yoni in a sense of the people that were there reacted quickly and they did what they had to do to isolate the incident as fast as possible. That's without dispute. It's the after effect on when a person becomes from a combatant into a non-combatant. What do you do then? And you have a 19-year-old with not a lack of training who is not looking at the incident as a policeman. He's looking at it as a soldier.
Yeah,
and as
of
a
course
soldier,
he doesn't think about the
ramifications,
the social, the aspects of it.
And then also at that moment, you can't expect a 19-year-old pent up full of stress and testosterone to like have a level head.
Yeah.
And so, although I think they tried to do the best that they could, it was just a failure on the education in which they received, and they could just do better, or need to look at not sending people for their compulsory service into the Border Patrol and have more people that are more veteran and have been in combat situations to be a part of the Border Patrol, and make it kind of more of an honor instead of just a position that you put people in. And especially in Jerusalem, no less. Like if you're on the border on Nitzana, that's one thing, but like to be in East Jerusalem and having to deal with that incident at 19 years old, we're not even talking about how this person grew up and what their ideology is in regards to the situation at hand, right? He's just reacting, and some of the ways that maybe you grow up will lead you to act in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so those are things that also need to be considered when selecting people for these particular positions.
Yeah, I'll send you another video, which I remember now. It's of an Israeli border police officer. He's like 25, 26. And he's facing a group of like radical left Israelis who are trying to
feed him couscous and
no, they're trying to I think they're trying to cross a checkpoint in the West Bank into territory A.
Got it, yeah.
Which is illegal for them to go to. You know, maybe you can say it with your own words, but it's illegal for Israelis to go to territory A in the West Bank. And the way he reacts, they try to annoy him, they try to provoke him, and the way he reacts is so impressive. And I think someone puts like English subtitles to it, very professionally, very cool. And you see he got the training. You see that he knows that he's on camera. And then obviously the way he reacts is but it's very elegant. I will send you that.
Nice. So it's just a matter of breakdown on I think picking the right people for the particular jobs, but then also giving them the tools to utilize to be the best that they can be in that position. Mm-hmm. We were talking about the future role of soldiers in Israel. Do you feel that the model is still okay? Do you feel that with so many people not being part of that, does it create a more tense environment if you didn't do the military like we did before, but then also not the inclusion of some of the more Israeli Arabs, for example, ultra-Orthodox? Like, what if everybody at some point has to do some kind of mandatory national service of some kind?
Yeah.
How do you make it equitable across the board to where you can include these other groups to where it's not, is it nice to show that you were in a combat unit and doing all the stuff? Yes. But I think even within now going after the service, it's changing, right? People that come from 8200 seem to have more prestige in these special computer and R&D units now than actual infantry, and that's in that way. And what you were talking about, like the IDF doesn't need as much land as they did before to train and do all that stuff. How do you make it more equitable for all citizens to be part of the National Service Initiative and it giving you the same opportunities on the back end?
Yeah. So I am in favor of a system, of a mandatory system that will enable civil service for all young Israelis. And I don't think it will necessarily be very equal, I mean, because it's very challenging, but at least all of these young people who finish high school, whether it's a religious high school, secular high school, Jewish high school, Christian high school, whatever, they would do something for their country mm-hmm. for a limited amount of time. I mean, it could be 12 months, it could be 2 years, and then you've got Israeli Arabs, I don't know, let's just say Muslims in Haifa,
Nazareth, anywhere like that.
Nazareth, who are saying, no, I don't want to support the Zionist country by doing this kind of a civil service. And I would tell him, listen, like, okay, you don't want to support the Zionist idea, the Zionist country, I get it. So volunteer in your community. Like, we would get you a community-based service. Like, do something for your city, for your community, for your Muslims, for your brothers and sisters in the Muslim world surrounding you. And I would say the same for the ultra-Orthodox young man who lives in Bnei Brak, mm-hmm. who said, no, I don't want to take part in the Zionist systems. Okay, so let's take you to a volunteering position in that hospital in Netanya, I forgot the name, which is like an ultra-Orthodox hospital in Netanya. not Nordo. I forgot the name. But, let's match you up with an ultra-Orthodox educational frame that you can volunteer there and so on. Mm. And the soldiers, they will keep on doing their thing. By the way, I think being a soldier today, definitely if you find yourself in an infantry unit, you get some nice benefits. I mean, you can save a lot of money while doing this service from the monthly stipend. You get your college tuition covered when you graduate. You get this nice bonus of like 10,000, 15,000 shekels when you get out. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So it's a nice benefit. And the issue of Israel is going to the technological units. I mean, it's a challenge, yeah. It's like it's the effect of capitalism, of course. Yeah, you get out of a technological unit, you have experience, you have the knowledge, you have the connections, and you know a lot of people that served in your unit. They graduated from your unit 3-4 years ago. All of you have this WhatsApp group, like a very secret, very close, intimate WhatsApp group. People are saying, hey, I have this company. I'm looking for employees. I would like to hire new employees that are only from this unit. And here you go. You found yourself a job. And you are 23, 24. You're making 20,000 shekels a month.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years later, you'll be making 30,000 shekels a month. And what can I say about it? I mean, that's
life in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, smart people are always going to have an advantage. It doesn't matter about computers or technology in that sense, but just being able to utilize your talents in the best way possible. Before, it was doctors, it was lawyers. I
want to tell you something about the word you just said. You said smart people. I think many of these people in the intelligence technological units, and also in what we called there is a term in the IDF, the transparent units that no one knows anything about them. Mm-hmm. It's what they call it, transparent units. Many of these units are getting their new flesh, they're getting their new soldiers from soldiers who are inside the unit, who are giving personal recommendations about their friends to be drafted to the unit. So you're not necessarily you're not a genius. You just grew up in the right neighborhood, and you have enough friends in these units that...
So there's even nepotism in the special units.
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
So with the IDF moving in the direction that it's going, it's like most militaries are going the same way, right? Less people, more advancement in technology and research and things like that. Where do you feel that Israel is a leading trendsetter, not just from the military and the R&D, but like moving forward? Like, where do you see the technology space? Like, what is Israel as a nation and as industries that they're a part of? What are they offering the world, and what can they get back from the world from what they do?
Okay, so you ask a big question. I can tell you that maybe I can divide it to parts, but I can tell you this. So I am an officer now in an armored brigade in the border with Lebanon, and I'm doing all kind of stuff in that brigade as a staff officer. And I have to tell you, military service today, and I'm talking about the reserved service, because that's what I know. I do about between 15 to 20 days every year, becomes way more technological. A lot of technological tools, different apps that change every year and a half. You have to be like tech savvy, if you want to get things done quickly. You don't want to be that old reserved officer who is sitting there in front of the computer saying like, I don't know what to do. I need a young soldier to come and tell me how do I operate this. So it's a very technological system, I would say that. And it obviously means that if you are coming to the IDF today without enough exposure to technology, computers, having access to all of these things, English also, you're gonna need to face some challenges.
Right.
And what did you ask about the impact of the IDF on the world, or?
Well, just in a sense of like Israel as a nation, like having all this experience that comes from the IDF and translates into the business world here, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of different industries that Israel seems to be a technology leader or an industry leader in, let's say, hardware, software, agriculture, I would say probably building technology, thinking about the raw materials and how to utilize them effectively, hydrology, as far as like water conservation and how to reuse water. There's many things that are happening here that I think are becoming problems around the world, but Israel's had to deal with them from the beginning because of the necessity to innovate and create some kind of chance and hope for the nation to grow. What industry do you think will be the most effective to export to the outside world?
I mean, in the field of agriculture, technology, Israel is doing great. And we are exporting a lot of this knowledge to Africa and other and third world countries. I have a friend who is in the business of agricultural drones.
Okay.
Yeah, so drones that can give you a lot of insights as a farmer about the status of your field, the status of your crops, where you should add more water, where you should add more fertilizer, and so on. So that's definitely one of the fields. And besides that, I can tell you, I don't have enough knowledge, but you see cool examples of Israeli innovation all the time. I don't know if you know that, but when you search something on Google and you start to write the word, and then automatically you see like 5-6 different options of that's what I want. That came from Israel, from the Google R&D center in Israel.
ICQ also came from Israel.
Yeah, ICQ. That was a classic.
It was all over the world. It was. I remember that in the late 90s.
I used to spend a lot of time on ICQ, texting people here in not texting, IM, instant messaging people here in my neighborhood. And I remember, I had this very intimate communication with one of my friends at school. But she was like, we didn't really talk to each other face to face, just on ICQ, and tell all of the secrets and everything. It was a very, very personal connection. But when you see each other at school face to face, you don't have the courage to say what you say on instant messaging.
So what do you think about the metaverse and like all this stuff that they're trying to do, taking what you're doing, what you're talking about, and building it out even more so?
I'm a little bit skeptical about the success of it. I didn't have any good experiences yet with VR and AR. I can appreciate the idea of it. I used to be a gamer, so I know how it feels like to build a relationship with other gamers and do things together. But you're asking me to imagine like a group of architects getting together into a meeting through a VR system, and like each one of them is at home, but they are like at this room around the table trying to design this building. It's hard for me to imagine.
Yeah.
Today, at my work as an educator, I can see how when a group of educators is getting together to plan an educational activity, it's much easier when you see each other face to face than when you do a Zoom call about it. But again, Zoom calls are much more efficient. I had I had a Zoom meeting yesterday that started in this situation in which all of us were sitting, in front of our laptops talking. But after 60 minutes, people have to go. So, like we're walking, we're getting to our next destination, but we are still having this conversation. We'll just turn off the camera and then you switch to your Bluetooth headphone. So the meeting can continue, even though some people are like walking to their next meeting. So that was really cool for me, that the flexibility you get.
So we can use that as an example as well. Like, this is your second time doing a podcast with me. Mm-hmm. The first one, we had some serious stuff that we had to talk about, and we did it over Zoom, and it was probably about an hour and a half, and it was with multiple people at the same time. And then now your experience here, it's just me and you in the apartment here. We have all this equipment, but we're face to face like we normally would be hanging out. I personally feel like this is a way better version of what we can do. It's just, do you think we're getting too complacent on technology to really connect the way we used to as people? And is it affecting society overall by making it so easy to connect and everything else? For me personally, like people like you and other people in Israel, for example, it's great to connect on WhatsApp or whatever, but like we have depth in our relationship, because we have very meaningful conversations, but we try to do it in person as opposed to back and forth online or whatever. Yeah. Do you feel like we're cutting ourselves short of the human connection that we have as people if we continue to use technology and leverage technology so much?
I would say generally I agree. I think we need to use technology in a smart way. I'll give you an example. So I used to do these educational trips to small Jewish communities in the US. I would do like 10 days road trip, an educational road trip. In 10 days, I would visit 3 communities. All of them are relatively close to another. The last communities I visited was Toledo, Ohio, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. Mm-hmm. So when I get there, when it's face to face, I can there, they can see me. They can, it's funny. They can smell my perfume. They can see how my face is reacting to different situations. That is much more effective than what I'm doing today when I sometimes talk to these communities on Zoom. It's so difficult. And the virtual encounter, it's like, what camera are you using? What microphone? Like, where are the kids in the perspective of the screen? And how, it's so many different variables. So I do get a positive feedback from the communities saying, Yoni, wow, these Zoom meetings are great. Mm-hmm. But personally, I feel I have a way less of an ability to reach out and affect these children and teenagers.
Right.
Yeah.
I look at it from a business standpoint too. Like me being in finance now, and with COVID, everything has gone online. Mm-hmm. So we could talk with people from around the world on having to sell their company in some way, and we don't have the like you said, I think you can't get a true feeling of somebody online. I really don't. I think you have to see them in person. Like you said, you have to interact with them. You have to understand the nonverbal and the values and the culture come out off screen, not on screen. And so as much as people try to replicate that online, I just don't feel, if you already have a relationship with somebody, then it's easy. You can keep it going. Yeah. But until you have that connection, it's really tough in that sense. And so I wonder if our business model will need to change as Corona changes and we become more adapt to meeting people in person again, to like win them over for business, to represent them, to sell their companies. I think what's interesting to me is here it seems like it's always kind of, it happens here a little bit first, and then like things happen in the rest of the world. Like it's almost like the country, because it's small, is like an incubator. in some ways with technology specifically. So,
Yeah.
for example, Waze or something like that, right? Where people were actively putting in information, really didn't make any money, had a couple ads here or there, but if it was bought by Google or whoever bought it, I think Google did.
Google, yeah.
Yeah. So they were able to take it and use it along with Google Maps and all the other stuff, and it's a much better function underneath the umbrella of somebody bigger than it is by itself. Do you think that trend will continue in technology for Israel? Or do you feel from what you've seen, because you kind of have like one foot in, one foot out with tech companies, and you kind of flirted with it a little bit personally to like work with them or work for them, do you feel that this model is still the same, where you build something, you grow it, and then you sell it? Or do you feel that Israelis are starting to change and realize that they're leaving a lot of money off the table that could be theirs, and they're not selling as easily or as fast?
Yeah, I think it's slowly changing. You see many entrepreneurs who get inspired from companies like Lemonade, like Monday, Similar Web, companies that eventually went through the IPO path. They're doing very good now. I just heard an interview with the CEO and founder of Monday.com. Mm-hmm. And he said, like, we never had a thought about selling. Like, it was very clear to us from the beginning that we will never sell. Like, we're going to the IPO path. We want to build a large company. We want to be massive. We want to be big. Again, like Wix is another example. Mm-hmm. I think these waves of companies inspire a lot of young entrepreneurs to go to this path. And again, there will always be Israelis who are interested in doing an exit.
Yeah, for sure. And rightly so, because it's just, you build something, you're growing it to a certain level, but what people fail to realize is life changes, And the circumstances of your passion change, and your passion might go somewhere else.
I think many of these founders, the successful ones, of multi-billions, of all of these Israeli unicorns, highly motivated, very focused, very serious about what they do. They don't play around. They, unlike me, they don't watch Netflix till 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. They are very eyes on the prize.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sets them apart from other less successful entrepreneurs. But you see, some of these people are saying, once I got married and I had like one kid, 2 kids, all of a sudden I'm saying maybe it's not worth it working 12, 13 hours a day. I want to spend time with my family. So they would go to the exit path, and
Yeah, it makes sense. So back to your story, having been out of the IDF now, but still doing reserve duty. You went after the military. You were able to essentially apply and become an emissary for the Jewish agency and be able to live in the U.S. in some way. And represent Israel, but the Jewish community as a whole. What was that process like for you, and were you surprised on where you ended up?
So I got out of the army. It was March 2013, and I had an amazing experience as an officer, though I realized I had to leave. Like, I have this memory of me sitting at the mess hall, at the dining hall, at the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv, and I'm looking to my right and I'm looking to my left. I see all of these majors and lieutenant colonels with their beer belly, sitting, eating the cheap IDF food, and like, and many of them looked very gray, very like, like regular. And that was a moment for me, like I realized, it's about time I leave. Like, I need to do something new. So I got out, and I was almost 26. And I didn't want to go to college yet. I knew that college was not the right thing for me to do. And I had a friend who just finished a job as an Israeli emissary working for the Jewish Agency for Israel, which is the oldest non-profit in Israel. And he said, listen, Yoni, I just did this really cool gig in Portland, and you should check it out. So I looked it online, and I realized there is this amazing program that sends young men and women to Jewish communities around the world to live there between 1 to 4 years. And I applied. I got in. It was kind of a long process, but not very long. I mean, like 2 interviews and like a psych evaluation and some tests and some stuff like group dynamics. And once I got in, they said, okay, like, you got the job, now we need to find you a community. So it's kind of a lottery system in which they tell you, okay, there's an opening at Denver, Colorado. Like, would you like to get to an interview? And I would say, okay. I have no idea. Like, I never heard about Denver. The only thing I know about Denver is Denver, the Last Dinosaur, which was a very popular cartoon in Israel in the 80s and the 90s. But I know, Denver, there's a dinosaur called Denver. So I got the interview, and it was a very lovely interview.
Do you remember who you talked to?
I think it was an interview with my supervisor back then, and maybe his boss. So Gilad Schwartz, who used to be my supervisor, who used to be the head of ranch camp in Colorado, and Karen Blank, who used to work at the JCC. So a lot of like very nice people. The next thing I did, I got on YouTube, and I wrote down moving to Denver, and I started to watch a lot of video clips by real estate agents trying, selling houses in Denver. So, that was my first knowledge of Denver.
So you knew the good neighborhoods?
The real estate market, it's like, and I see, wow, it's really beautiful. Yeah, so I ended up there, and I ended up being there for 2 years. Amazing time. Really amazing time. It was my second time living in the States, because I was living in LA for 2 months when I was 16. But in one moment when I moved to Denver, I became like a bit older. I mean,
older than grandpa?
Yeah, no, but in a good way, because finally I have my own apartment, and I'm living there by myself. I have my parking spot. I have my car. I have an office. I have a salary. So all of a sudden, like, wow, you're not that young officer anymore, walking around at the IDF HQ in Tel Aviv, schlepping your bag and like, hurrying to the next meeting. Wow, like this is a nice job. You get an office, you get an apartment, you get a car. The big deal. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of gain my, I'm being philosophical, but gain my manhood also.
Sure.
And being that adult in the world that now has like real responsibilities of adults. I mean, it's different because the military, it's a bubble. Yeah, I would get this, I remember a military moment, I would get this minigun, and I was like shooting around in this training session. And thinking, I could fall now and maybe kill 5 people accidentally. So that's a different kind of responsibility. So yeah, I had a really good time in the Jewish community, lovely Jewish community. Very, they received me in a very warm and nice way, and I think I was good at what I did, as a shaliach, as a Jewish educator, as an Israel educator. I became much more connected to my Jewish identity while living in the States. So I had to get away of Israel to become a bit more Jewish.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. A lot of people say that.
And in Israel, I didn't go to services on a synagogue, but in Denver, I found myself a synagogue. I started going to services once a month, twice a month. Yeah, great time.
So I'll ask you a question I was asking the other Shin on the thing. And so looking back at your life now, name a time or a moment in Israel history, like shlichut, like that you would tell Denver, Colorado Jewish people about, or just Denver, Colorado people about in general, that inspires you.
Okay.
Can be near or far. It could be something you learned in school or something that recently happened, something you personally experienced, anything.
Something I would tell them that inspired me, not something that happened there.
Right, exactly. Something that happened in Israel that they need to know about in some way to make them understand you more and understand Israel as a country more.
I have a moment I remember as a young platoon commander. So that was my first job outside of officer school. I was a platoon commander in basic training boot camp. And I had a soldier that was living in Netanya. So that's a city north of Tel Aviv. And he told me that he wants to get out of the combat route and become like an office soldier because he needs to work. Like he needs to save money for his family. And I said, like, I'm open to hear his story, but the military orders require me to visit him at his home. So I took a driver and I took a car, like thinking of that time, I had drivers. But I took a driver and a car, and I took the IDF social worker, which is, she's young, she's like 19, 20, but that's what she does. She's an IDF social worker. And we drove up to his house in Netanya from the Negev. And I get to this house and I'm in shock because it's basically a construction site. So what happened is that this family was living in a regular home and they were saving a lot of money to build this new home. And the constructions began, but they ran out of money. So they couldn't pay the rent anymore in the regular home, so they moved to this construction site. And you see a family living in a construction site, there is no floor, it's all sandy, like the wiring is all exposed. And, here there's a wall, but here there's not a wall. And here you got a ceiling, and here you don't have a ceiling. And all of a sudden you realize, like, this soldier is not bullshitting me. Like, this is a real situation. Someone needs to assist him. Someone needs to move him from a combat position to an office job. To provide him the ability to work and bring money to his family. So that was a very strong and vivid moment. By the way, what was very stood out in that construction site, and it's kind of, it's kind of the foundation stone of every family in Israel today in this capital world of us, a television with cables. Like that was there. It was very important, to be able to watch cable TV, to be connected to the culture, to what everyone else saying, but no walls and no...
Yeah, no, that's definitely impactful. And like, I think it's just a testament to the constant change that's here, Like other places, you go and that this store will always be there because it's like the only bakery in this area and this only coffee shop or whatever, but like in other places around the world, right? But here it's just like, man, you can come back in a year. Like me and you were walking on the old Jaffa Road and we like come back and like half a building's missing. It's like, all right, cool, but damn, like I think the bureaucracy, that's what's interesting to me here, is like there's so much bureaucracy, but like once you get through it, like things get done. It's So it must have been rewarding. What do you take away from your experience in Denver? Like, if somebody in Israel were to ask you about Denver, what's it like? You know, I only know about New York or LA. Like, what the hell is in Denver? You know, like.
So I think there's a strong emphasis on life-work balance, quality of life. People really enjoy the fact they can do some really high-level hiking at the weekend or even at the end of a workday, if it's the summer, or maybe start their day by hiking or biking and then come to the office. A lot of emphasis on sport, working out. Again, life quality is great. You got to have a car, I would say. Like, if you don't have a car, it's like you don't exist, which was kind of sad sometimes to see people who don't have a car. You know, I took the bus once or twice, and you suddenly understand the hardships of some of these people, and then you ask yourself, like, wow, like, what does it mean on a city that doesn't provide proper public transportation to its residents? And all of a sudden you feel kind of fortunate about the public transportation in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, even though Israelis are accustomed with complaining about the transportation here.
But you know why that is? Like, why?
Well, I guess it's not efficient, yeah, because the minority of people needs it, or because Denver is too spread out, or.
So it comes back from the time when the car was invented. And so what ended up happening was car companies were buying out train stations, and then they shut them down to force you to have to buy a car.
Interesting.
So they changed the model to force you to want to have to buy a car, and they made it more economical because of the assembly line manufacturing to be able to afford a car. So they became also the mode of transportation, and the car companies also at the same time became banks in some way to allow you to buy it even on credit and be able to pay it and go in, and they can keep the system going.
No, I mean, the prices of cars and gas, wow, you know, it's amazing. And compared to Israel, it's definitely more affordable. But yeah, beautiful city, great lifestyle, great nightlife, strong sense of community. That's how I felt it. I kind of immersed myself in the community. I loved hosting people in my apartment and making dinners. My tahina is very famous.
Yes, with the lemon. For those those are purists out there.
Tell them what is tahina.
Tahina is tahini, which is sesame seed paste. It's crushed up in kind of it almost looks like kind of a wax in a can, like a tuna can.
Yeah.
And then you add water and salt, pepper, and that you can leave it at that. But Yoni makes it a little
lemon
different.
and garlic. Yeah,
there you go. It's because he's Libyan. It's got to have flavor.
Yeah.
So Denver, you're coming back. And
came back. Yeah.
And
it was a bit difficult. It was very difficult to come back.
And what do you mean by that?
So I think there's a sense of a little bit sense of trauma for Israeli emissaries who come back. And why do I use this word trauma? Because it's a strong word. It was very difficult to realize all of a sudden that, first of all of these materialistic things are gone. So you don't have your car anymore. You don't have your own apartment. So I had to go and live with roommates. So I moved to Jerusalem. Yeah, from Denver, I moved to Jerusalem to become a student at the Hebrew University, studying political science and communications and journalism. And of course, you know, maybe I could have afforded myself to live by myself, but I didn't want to do it. I felt it was financially not very smart. So I moved to an apartment with two other roommates. So I lost my financial independence. Some of it was by choice, some of it was intentional. But that was not the main thing I lost. The main thing I lost was my reputation as an emissary. Because before I could walk in an event at the Jewish community with like 200 people. And as I walk, people would look at me and say like, oh, here is the emissary. Like, he's the new guy here.
You're like a little rock star.
Like a little rock star in the Jewish world. Like I had a reputation. I had like a name to myself. And all of a sudden, you come back to Israel. You're just like another Israeli guy, building his path, making his way in the world. And it took me a long time to handle it or to cope with it. Up until today, I still have kind of little bits of that sense of lost, as if I lost something.
Mm-hmm.
But the transition is very difficult to a lot of emissaries who are moving from living with like very high level standards of living and a great sense of meaning to become regular Israelis again, who are, just here.
Do you think it almost teases you, like in the life you could have?
Yeah, it teases you. I think it made me think of, what would have happened if I stayed. By the way, I was also offered to stay a third year in Denver, and I said no because it didn't feel right. And I met many women in Denver dating over there who said, listen, like, I'm really interested in whether you are willing to stay or not. And if you're not willing to stay, then to be honest, you're not very interesting to me. It's like, very honest, like the second date, third date. After the third date, usually this question comes out, are you willing to stay in America? And I would say no, I see my future in Israel.
Isn't it strange, though, to like go through an experience like that? Essentially, you move to another country, but there's a shelf life. There's an expiration date, like at a predetermined expiration
date. Like
an
ambassador, it's like,
It's
crazy. But again, for me, I think it was a gift. Denver will always be a second home to me. I hope to. I visited it once already. I hope to visit it many times in the future.
It's funny the way you talk about Denver. I talk about Tel Aviv.
Nice, cool.
It's like it could be a second home for sure. Like I've definitely have thought about it. Like in a perfect world, like for me, it's be like Berlin summers and Tel Aviv winters. Like.
Nice.
Kind of the best, like it would be so selfish, but like the best of both worlds, so like coming back, you're doing your thing, and what was the main challenge for you when you're coming back and you're coming back from this lifestyle, this prestige in some way of this position? You come back, you're integrating into society. People are just like, yeah, whatever. Great. What was it like for you trying to find a niche or a job or anything else? Because I know, like, for example, for me, I kind of already had that path going into private, like contracting or independent work and things like that. What's it like for the average Israeli when they leave the service, or even like what you were doing as an emissary, to come back to and figure out like where do you belong from a business sense or from a career sense?
So ask again, what's the average?
How do you feel, or what's the best way you think that people feel about finding their path on like their career, like after they go through emissary work like that?
I think you make me think of the author, the Israeli author and historian, Yuval Noah Harari, who in his latest book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, is saying, it's in the episode about education, he says that one of the main things that he wishes for young people today is to know themselves very well. Like he says, like you really need to know yourself very well in order to make the right decisions, and also in order to build yourself a successful career in an ever-changing world. Yuval thinks that, in our lifetime today, people in your age, my age, we are going to change, between 5, 6, 7 jobs in our lifetime, maybe more. So I think going through that experience, being in the army for so long, living in Denver, coming back to Israel to be a college student at the age of 28, got me into a situation in which I know myself very well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I comfortably went and studied political science and communications, because that was a passion of mine, and not computer science, because that's what
it's sexy.
It's sexy and what my bank account needs and so on. And I think eventually that's what led me to become self-employed about 3 years ago, and like an educational entrepreneur. And not getting a regular job, with like a daily routine and a boss. So one of the reasons I tell people that shlichut, to be an emissary, it's a good idea, is that it's a great opportunity for you to learn about yourself, to see how you handle living in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, away from your supporting systems, away from your parents and your friends and so on.
Yeah,
there's a lot of loneliness being an emissary in the beginning, I would say. Like at a couple of the first 3-4 months, you are very lonely out there. The nights were very cold. And it takes time. And also, being lonely, that's a great challenge. It's like, deal with it. Like, so many of us are afraid of being alone, afraid of, you see people on their first dates here in Tel Aviv, like, they have to talk all the time, talk and talk and talk. They cannot absorb a moment of silence. They cannot deal with it. It's like, silent is terrible. No, it's like, be alone for a moment. Like, deal with it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you're comfortable alone?
I'm comfortable alone. But again, because of my life experiences, for example, I traveled by myself for a month in Peru.
Okay.
And I can tell you after that experience that for me, traveling abroad, hiking, traveling, exploring new cities and new countries, that's something I prefer to do with a partner or with a group of people.
Yeah.
Just because it makes me happier.
Shared experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, I think that it's crazy how our relationship has grown into what it is today. Like if you thought about it, I would never think that you'd be one of my better friends in Israel. Like, it's just the way it goes. It's just like, but you have to allow and be open to letting things happen, right?
Yeah.
Like love.
Yeah, wow. Again, I did this job in Denver, and one of the gifts I got, like new friends, people I can reach out to and ask for assistance and ask for their advice and so on. It also resulted in me joining you for this trip in Germany, learning about German Jews and the history of that area. So yeah,
it's been crazy, and I just hope it continues. I think I think this time on the podcast, I think it gives people a real sense of an idea of who you are, but then secondly, they can understand your thought process a little bit more, maybe on some of the things on why you say things the way you do, because of the history of essentially of giving, right? You've been in a position of privilege in certain respects, based on, like you said, your parents moving from Ashkelon to here, to the big city, so to speak, and you were around other people and you saw good examples of how to lead a life that's fulfilling, as opposed to just like chasing what everybody else wants in certain ways. So that's what I always appreciate about you.
Thanks.
It's tough, it's easy to, like they say in English, to be a sellout, in some ways. And I think you've had even times where you question it yourself. Like, am I doing the jobs and the work that I'm doing for the right reasons? Why don't I just learn how to code or learn to be part of this ecosystem in this way? But like you were saying, like the self-awareness aspect of who you are and the experiences that you've had probably lets you to say, like, I'm a phony here. Like, I'm not this person or this part of these people like this. I can be around them, but our value system is a little different. And you're, I think, a good example of no matter what they decided on as far as like the compulsory service of this country. I think you're a great example of what can happen when people from all walks of life come together and appreciate each other's diversity and diversity of experiences to get to that point. Like when you're talking about the prison, hanging out, with an Ethiopian guy, and you're I never talked to a guy like this before. That right there generally doesn't even happen in the same way in the States. And so I just think that we as a society need to do more of that, more of the cross-talking, more of the acceptance within the tribe, right? In a sense of like, people around here, they throw achi around like brother, my brother, like around like it's like putting salt on a meal, right? But how many people actually mean it,
Yeah.
And I think that is going to come here in the future very soon, where you're going to have to accept these other people that are now second, third generation Israelis, from the Russians, the Ethiopians, even the Arabs that have been here for a while now in a sense of all their life, or the people that have actually come here to move back because they have some kind of connection to the land in the same way. I think that speaks volumes in a sense of being able to have that level of diversity. You're not going to agree on everything, but you agree on the respect for each other and kind of go from there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I would just say that, I think I'm surrounded by people that question their future in Israel. I mean, they're asking themselves whether they should stay in Israel. They have the ability to leave Israel. They have the means. Some of them have the foreign passports to do it. And I got a friend who left for Vancouver. I have a friend who left to New York. But for me, my perspective is a bit different. Like I see things in a more historical way. Like I'm thinking about my ancestors who made a decision to come here. And like it would be such a disrespecting thing to do, to live what was created here, because like so many people were dreaming about how this place would look like.
Yeah.
When you're reading the text of Theodor Herzl, for example, so many people imagine like how this place would look like, and here we are, and we've been in this business for more than 70 years. So why live it instead of like staying here and insist on making it a better place? So, yeah.
And what do you say to people that continue to want to be a part of it, like who are making aliyah and want to give back in some way? Do you think it's to a point where the country still wants it, needs it, outside people to come here to move? Or
yeah, I think we need it. I think aliyah, it's a positive thing. If I meet someone today, I don't know, I'll meet someone in Berlin, like a German Jew, and he tells me he's thinking about doing aliyah. I will tell him, you know what? Before you do aliyah, come and visit for a week, and maybe do birthright for 10 days, and then do Masa program for 5 months. After that, think if you want to do aliyah. If you still want to do aliyah after that, do aliyah. Okay, become a member of the country, but know that it's very difficult. That you need to have your support. Maybe even save some money before you do it. And ask yourself like why are you doing it? Because you're going to face a lot of challenges, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's just the biggest thing is like if you identify as Israeli, but you might not be as socially accepted as your kids per se. Like you're always going to be kind of an outsider if you move later in life per se.
Yeah, it's like we met someone, we met a friend of us, Yuda, who said that his mom, she only felt Israeli here after she was here for 20 years or 15 years.
When her kids started going to the army.
When her kids started to go to the army.
But it wasn't her perception of being Israeli, it was the perception of others considering her to be Israeli. That was the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they really just thought, you're just on a long holiday. Like you don't know what it's like to be Israeli. You'd be like, well, my kid's in the army now too, so.
Okay.
But
Ben, it's been a great pleasure.
Yeah.
I thought that, we're going to make it maybe 65 minutes, 70 minutes, but...
Did you know you're a talker?
It ended up... I am a talker, yeah.
Katzat.
Yeah, that's why I was a good emissary,
Who knows? Maybe you got a foreign service background in your future.
Yeah. People are telling me, come on, because now they are doing all of this advertisement, calling for people to apply to be cadets. But I'm not interested yet. Maybe in the future.
Find the lady first, and then
yeah.
Baba. All right, buddy.
Great.
Thanks as always. Appreciate it, and we'll be in touch and get more political next time.
Yalla.
Bye. The show is produced by myself, Ben, out of Denver, Colorado. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you consume the content. Audio versions are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and a ton of others. As far as the full shows go and clips of the show, YouTube is the best place to view it. Instagram would be another one to see the clips. Big shout out to Mike Xavier, a hip-hop artist based out of Vegas and LA, who allow us to use his music for the show. He also produces a show called Hip Hop and Poetry, owns Renowned Photos, and check his music out and anything else that he's got going on in Vegas or online and social media as well. One last thing, if you know someone interesting that you think would bring value to the audience in some way, by all means, email me or get in touch via social media, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on who would be one of those type of people. Thanks so much, and look forward to continuing to produce for you guys.